What would you do if a single spark of pettiness ignited a firestorm that consumed everything you thought you knew about justice, loyalty, and love? The summer air hung heavy with the scent of pine and wildflowers as Daniel and his wife, Judge Eleanor Harper, pulled into the gravel lot of their secluded cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was their sanctuary, a place where Eleanor could shed the weight of her federal judge's robe and Daniel could escape the grind of his law firm. The cabin, nestled among towering oaks and blooming cairn flowers, those vibrant, stubborn perennials that clung to the rocky soil, was their haven from the world's chaos. But this weekend, chaos had other plans. Daniel unloaded their bags, his laughter echoing as Eleanor teased him about his overpacked cooler. "You brought enough steaks to feed a jury," she said, her dark eyes sparkling. At 45, Eleanor was a force sharp-witted, unflappable, and revered in her courtroom for her fairness. Her presence commanded respect, but here, in jeans and a faded sweater, she was just Ellie, his Ellie. As they settled in, a sharp rap on the cabin door startled them. Daniel opened it to find a woman standing there, her lips pursed, clutching a clipboard like a weapon. Her name tag read Marjorie, HOA president. Her hair was a helmet of oversprayed blonde, and her eyes glinted with the kind of zeal that thrived on control. "I'm here about a violation," she announced, her voice clipped. "A violation?" Daniel asked, bemused. "We've been here 10 minutes. Marjorie pointed to the flower bed lining the cabin's porch. A cluster of cairn flowers, their petals a defiant burst of purple and gold, swayed in the breeze. "These," she said, "are non-compliant. The HOA mandates native species only. You'll need to remove them by Monday, or you're looking at a $500 fine." Eleanor stepped forward, her calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside. "Marjorie, is it? Those flowers have been here for years. They're cairn flowers, native to this region. I'm sure we can clear this up." Marjorie's smile was thin, venomous. "I've lived here for 15 years. I know the rules. You city folks think you can waltz in and ignore them. I'll be back Monday, and if those weeds aren't gone, you'll pay." She spun on her heel and marched off, her clipboard swinging like a guillotine. Daniel laughed it off, but Eleanor's jaw tightened. "She's not worth it," he said, pulling her close. But Eleanor wasn't one to let injustice slide, no matter how small. She spent the evening poring over the HOA bylaws, her legal mind dissecting every clause. By midnight, she'd confirmed what she suspected. Cairn flowers were native, and Marjorie's citation was baseless. The next morning, Daniel woke to find Eleanor gone. A note on the counter read, "Gone to confront Marjorie. Back soon." He sighed, knowing his wife's tenacity. Eleanor didn't just fight battles. She won wars. At the HOA office, a squat building overlooking the valley, Eleanor found Marjorie surrounded by a small crowd of residents. The air was thick with tension, as if Marjorie's word was law. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady but laced with steel. "Marjorie, your citation is invalid. Cairn flowers are native, per the state's botanical records. I'd like you to retract the fine." Marjorie's eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you are, telling me how to run my community? You're just a weekend renter. Pay the fine, or I'll escalate this to the board." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Eleanor's composure didn't waver. "I'm not a renter. I own that cabin, and I'm giving you a chance to correct this before it becomes a legal issue." Marjorie laughed, a sharp, grating sound. "Legal issue? Sweetheart, I am the law here. You'll regret crossing me." That's when the twist arrived, in the form of a soft-spoken man in his 60s, leaning on a cane at the edge of the crowd. His name was Harold, a retired botanist who'd lived in the mountains for decades. He cleared his throat, his voice quiet but firm. "Marjorie, she's right. Cairn flowers are native. I've studied them for years. You're mistaken." The crowd turned, whispers rippling. Marjorie's face reddened. "Stay out of this, Harold. You're not on the board." But Harold wasn't done. He pulled a worn notebook from his pocket, filled with meticulous notes and sketches of cairn flowers. I've documented every plant in this valley. You can't bully people into ripping out what belongs here." His words carried weight, and the crowd's allegiance began to shift. Marjorie doubled down, her voice rising. "This isn't about flowers. It's about order. You people come here thinking you're above us. I'll have those weeds torn out, and you'll pay every cent of that fine." Eleanor's eyes darkened. "Marjorie, I'm a federal judge. I deal with real law, not petty power trips. You're harassing us without cause, and I can assure you, the courts won't look kindly on that." The crowd gasped. Marjorie froze, her clipboard trembling in her hands. For a moment it seemed she might back down. But pride is a dangerous fuel. "A judge?" she sneered. "Then you should know better than to defy me. I'll make sure everyone in this community knows who you are. You'll never set foot here again without a fight." What Marjorie didn't know was that Eleanor had already contacted the HOA's legal counsel, a friend from law school. By Sunday, the board was reviewing Marjorie's conduct, prompted by Eleanor's formal complaint and Harold's testimony. The tide was turning, but Marjorie wasn't one to surrender. She launched a campaign, rallying her loyalists to paint Eleanor and Daniel as elitist outsiders. Flyers appeared on cabin doors, accusing them of disrupting community harmony. Daniel, usually the peacemaker, felt his blood boil. "This is insane, Ellie. She's turning our neighbors against us over flowers." Eleanor's voice was calm but resolute. "She's not fighting about flowers, Daniel. She's fighting for control. And she's about to lose." Monday morning arrived, and Marjorie returned with a landscaper in tow, ready to rip out the Karen flowers. But Harold was there, too, with a dozen residents who'd rallied to his side. They formed a human chain around the flower bed, their faces defiant. Marjorie screamed, threatening fines and lawsuits, but the crowd held firm. Eleanor stepped forward, holding a court order she'd expedited through her contacts. "Marjorie, this injunction prohibits you from touching our property. Step back, or you'll be in contempt." Marjorie's face crumpled, her authority shattered. She stormed off, vowing revenge. For a moment, it seemed like a victory. The crowd cheered, Harold shook Eleanor's hand, and the Karen flowers stood tall, their petals catching the sunlight. But the story didn't end there. Late that night, as Daniel and Eleanor packed to return to the city, a glow flickered outside. Daniel rushed to the window and saw flames licking the flower bed. The Karen flowers were burning, their vibrant colors consumed by smoke. Marjorie stood in the shadows, a gas can at her feet, her eyes wild with vindication. Daniel shouted, grabbing a fire extinguisher, but Eleanor stopped him. "Call the police," she said, her voice breaking. As sirens wailed in the distance, Marjorie vanished into the woods. The fire was doused, but the flower bed was gone, reduced to ash. The police caught Marjorie by dawn, charging her with arson. At her hearing, Eleanor sat in the gallery, her face unreadable. Marjorie, stripped of her HOA title and facing jail time, glared at her, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She'd won, but at what cost? Back at the cabin, Daniel and Eleanor stood over the charred remains of their flower bed. Harold had promised to replant, to bring the Karen flowers back, but Eleanor shook her head. "It's not about the flowers," she whispered. "It's about what they meant. A place where we could be free." Daniel took her hand, his heart heavy. They'd fought for justice, exposed a tyrant, and protected their home. But the cabin no longer felt like a sanctuary. Marjorie's pettiness had scorched more than Flowersit had burned away their peace. As they drove away, the mountains fading in the rear view, Eleanor stared out the window, her judge's robe waiting back in the city. She'd upheld the law, but the victory was hollow. The Karen flowers, like her hope for a simple escape, were gone, and no court could bring them back. ND